second set of eyes.
Second, and having that second set of eyes, and I think it's a good idea to keep an entity in that for the district, so it's not just in-house, that it has that outside influence or knowledge base, and that can steer us in the right direction, and basically point out if something's not up to speed.
And I have a feeling that if you were to do an RFP requesting that type of a service, she'd probably be the only one that would respond to it.
I would have to do that to make, to say that, but 3 years have gone by, basically 2.5 years, and now doing the last 4 audits are complete. We've got good opinions. We may get more interest because initially.
Now it's all straightened out.
Yeah, initially it was a wrecked car. Now we're trying to sell a used car.
A used car with a salvage title.
Okay, so are there any questions?
Go ahead. Is there a purchase order for Kramer?
I'll have to check with Paula. What I seen was on paper signed by Kramer, an hourly rate for her services, describing the audit detail she was doing. I don't have an electronic form. I was trying to get that, but myself and tomorrow both recall seeing that. I just don't have it. Another thing that we're doing on purchases is having purchase order requests even lower than the, we'll bring anything 5,000 over to you, but pretty much everything invoice will have a purchase order justifying the purchase. And that was just one thing that Alex said looks really good in my closing interview with him, that moving forward, it's always really good to have the purchase order request justifications, pretty much in public money with everything.
What was that amount?
It's not,
Over
it's,
5,000?
well, 5,000 has to go to the board for approval. Anything under would just have, you just write a justification.
Yeah, you issue a purchase order for anything exceeding $5,000 according to our policy.
According to our policy, and Alex stated anything that we purchase, it generates a receipt, should have justification attached to it for clarity.
Is everybody okay with $5,000?
I have a problem with the limitation of our policy, because we had an example where, I think it was a Tough Books, where you bought a couple of them were bought, and they were underneath the $5,000 purchase order. Then a couple more were bought, and so the total purchase came over 5,000. So that seems to be a limitation in our policy.
It's called a split order.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my concern. Like right here on the purchase order section 4.0, it says, example includes the transport of sewage sludge, wherein individually transports less than 5,000, but estimated total cost exceeds 5,000. So that should go towards the board in that
Kind of the same thing.
Yeah, that's kind of what happened.
Well, it's called a split order. It's not, it's a way to get around the policy, and it's not appropriate.
I'm aware of the one on the Tough Books that wasn't intentional, because the first part was done and working with the system on what we were changing. One of the issues is I had a tower in the process of that started malfunctioning, and it wasn't, to fix it was more cost prohibitive and to replace it, because it wasn't going to keep up with the direction we were going. So we ended up going beyond that at 2 separate points. So we went with a purchase, and then we said, since this is going down, we need to replace it. Instead of spending money and fixing that, let's go ahead and do it. And that's how that ended up happening. On the second part with the sludge,
Oh, no, that was just in there, and it was in the example.
Oh,
Yeah, it's an example on here.
okay. Well, I was going to say anything that is work, like if you're working, doing a job, or something's in place, and it was contracted out and there was a bid given, and then for some reason it exceeds that and the operation's in place, we may not be able to come back to the board to get authorization to do that extended expense. Because we have to finish that operation, and Kelly's aware, made me aware of that, so. But yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Could somebody read section 1 to me on page 3 of 18? I read it and I can't.
Section 1,
Yeah, section one, purchases less than
five
5,000.
thousand.
yes.
Provided that there are adequate budget appropriations available and that no administrative restrictions have been imposed by the manager or his or her designee may purchase supplies and services up to $4,999.99 without approval of the board of directors or insurance of a purchase
Who
order
may purchase?
except as follows.
Provided
The
there
general
are-
manager
There's
is
supposed to be a
designated.
comment after manager.
General manager or his or her designee.
provided there's no restrictions that have been imposed by the manager or his or her designee, comma,
Like those,
may purchase supplies and services. It doesn't make
I
sense.
think the by is not supposed to be.
The what?
I think the by, imposed by, it should be imposed. The manager or his or her designee may purchase
Yes.
supplies up to.
Okay, so the manager is the one that has the authority, is the only one that has the authority to make purchases.
Or his
Or designate someone
Or
to
if
make
you
that
designate
purchase.
somebody to do that, which means the manager, so let's get a correction in there on that, so it can be read.
Section 1, 0.
And then, that means that the manager should be reviewing and signing off on every single purchase prior to it being made. Is that happening?
Under the 5,000, unless it's coming to the board,
It's not coming to the board because it's under 5,000.
The
You just-
purchase requests have been added, but for instance, Director of Utility Services is purchasing things that are constant to
Right.
keep the system
Under
running.
5,000? So
Correct.
you've designated him to do
or
that.
me, I buy paper.
Yeah, she buys her office supplies and stuff like that. I have not viewed those before purchases were made, if it's within their normal
Before they're
operation.
paid, he sees them and signs off on them.
I think everything should be reviewed, make sure there's a necessity for it, and it's even in here. There's an exception for computers and software,
That goes always to,
and then there was another one that I read that was things that were deemed necessity, I believe is how it was put.
I don't have it.
And that the general manager has to review that and make that determination before the check is cut, or the designee has to get credit back for the item. Did everybody read that?
Where's that? What page?
Yeah,
4 of 18?
I read this thing today and it's somewhere in here.
Somewhere in there.
I didn't have a way to make notes.
Well, you wanna go through
I lost
section?
my pencil.
There's exceptions in that
And
make
what-
for computer purchases and software purchases that have to be signed off by the manager.
RIT is, Alan is really good at explaining everything and getting it, explaining the reason for it. He's very conscientious of the cost and also the need, our operation to function. It may not be the cheapest, but he's really big on security, being a public agency. He always steers us towards safety on the security side of it, being that what his specialty is stopping hacking. And so keeping our financials, everything secured, and then our system being up and running for us without failures.
It's item 8, approval, page 15 of 18. Approval of the transactions that employees have made using the merchant cards will not be totally defined in these procedures. Department heads or supervisors, because of their knowledge of the job responsibilities of employees, are required to look at each employee's purchase and at the merchant who made the sale in order to determine if these items were for official use and if they were items allowed to be purchased in accordance with the instructions provided. If for any reason the manager questions the purchase, it is his or her responsibility to resolve the issue with the employee. If he or she cannot be satisfied that the purchase was necessary for official use, then the employee must provide a credit voucher proving items have been returned for credit or personal check for cash.
I think Laverne knows
Full
some of
amount
that
of that purchase.
So say if someone buys something that's inappropriate, they're gonna be billed for. They need to pay the district back for what
Right.
they purchased, is not supposed
Say I go to Costco and go,
Our, so currently right now, the card holders
It's
are
happening.
basically myself, Scott, Kelly, Tamara, they're supervisors of their respective areas, and they authorize or make the purchase themselves. Nobody else.
Right, but it's the general manager's
to
You're
look at.
reviewing, you're reviewing
responsibility
these
to
in your-
review
Yes.
all of those purchases.
It
And
all-
he does.
It goes in the
Because they're
envelope,
your
and they
employees.
come back and they're all signed
Designates.
before the
The bill is
checks.
paid,
right?
yeah.
So that's happening?
Yes.
Yes.
That should be mentioned in your SOP.
Oh, it is.
It is, and it's even identified by the color folder it's handed me.
I have a question about that, and the procedure. Because the way how that policy is written, it doesn't address what happened at IWMA.
Okay, just
Way back
cut to
when.
the chase and tell us what happened.
The general manager gave his buddy a district credit card, he was buying all sorts of wonderful stuff, it turned like $10,000, and he was signing up for it. But they didn't catch it until they actually had to hire an independent
Well,
investigator.
that's theft in my book.
Why
You're
not?
taking a card and you're spending money arbitrarily without, you know.
That's investment
Fraudulent
behavior.
Yeah, it was, but where's the double check?
Who's looking at it
Every one of our card purchases that come through, and everything that's purchased is signed
We're
off.
into this fight.
No, we're well off into the weeds now. We have,
Right.
your checks and balances already have a general manager whom you trust, I
I trust her.
So that's your checks and balances.
Right, but we've had general managers in the past who may or may
I know, but we don't have.
So in the
But we should.
claims detail that's provided to the board monthly, it lists
US Bank.
US Bank, which is a credit card, and it lists all the different purchases made in that. So if at any point you guys feel like there is a purchase that is not explainable, then that is your point, a point in time to talk to the general manager and tell him you're not satisfied and get an explanation
You
from
have
him.
to review authority.
To take it a step further, as Kelly's explaining, not only are they reviewed, but because we have 4 different funds, 5 different funds, each purchase is coded to what fund is going to pay how much. Even the funds that are multiple funds are funding a certain item. So it gets scrutinized several different ways.
Okay.
And
And
nothing
receipts are
gets paid.
submitted for everything.
Yeah, nothing gets paid without a receipt,
No.
right?
It's a fact.
It's true.
Too loud, then give it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to address something that's probably more in line with the whole point of having a purchasing policy, okay? The whole point of having a purchasing policy is to promote fiscal responsibility of district funds for which we're responsible. So we're talking about transparency and accountability. And we do have review of any of the financials, including the credit card used by district personnel. So I don't foresee that as an issue. Where I do take issue is that we have clearly defined quotation and bid structures for non-professional services, hence goods and non-professional services. However, when we get to professional services, there is no requirement for quotations or bids. And it states clearly that any purchase in excess of $25,000 must be brought to the board. Anything less than $25,000, the general manager has authority to sign off on that. So, as I mentioned earlier in this meeting, with regards to the previous meeting and the authorization of $170,000 for professional services, did that fall within this policy? Technically, yes. Is that a best practice? Absolutely not. Does it show that we're promoting transparency and that we're doing our due diligence to be financially responsible with district resources? Not really. Do you know why? Because there is no trail of any diligence that took place in doing that. While I agree with Mr. Dodds that contracting with Monsoon is likely the most reasonably priced option, he's also intimately knowledgeable about our district, our needs, our water, our wastewater, all of that.
So I should do it.
But the point is that we don't have, there's no competitive bids, there's no benchmarking for us to say, for example, Mr. Davis walks in and says, hey, you guys just spent $178,000 on this. Well, couldn't you got it cheaper somewhere else?
I don't know.
Don't know, because there was no benchmark. So the point I'm making here is that we're utilizing this for what it should be, which is being financially responsible with district resources, we don't have any checks or balances on professional services. It's just,
And with all
Whatever you
that
want.
said, we have a contractual obligation with Monsoon. We don't currently have a contractual obligation with Kramer. And I agree that Kramer is necessary in doing a good job, but we don't have a purchase order.
Right.
We're over $25,000
Yep.
and they're not contracted for professional services even.
And I
So
had that.
I'd like to see us get into compliance with that, on that issue and
it's about best
everything
practices.
following.
We're spending public money.
Yes.
So when the public asks, how are
Where's
you
our
spending my money? Did you do a good job spending that money?
We did, but we can't prove it.
Right.
We did the right thing.
Are we gonna go
We
to
just
the,
can't prove it.
And as I said.
And that's the-
Before, I do agree with you 100%. I had a conversation, to how it evolved into her being here with the time that was committed. It's not typical to do 4 audits in 1 year.
Sure.
Agreed.
And then also entangle the mess, but, and the difficulty, but there's no reason why RFP and a bid process, even if nobody applies for it, at least it's noted that it
Right.
was done.
you know,
even beyond that, or just, there should have been a purchase, there needs to be a purchase order, you know?
Yeah.
Even if this turns out to be a sole source or whatever, or we do the RFP, you know, we need that paper trail, we need that.
I agree.
And it also says, you know, brought to the board.
right.
I don't remember Kramer being brought to the board for approval, but that could have been happening a long time ago that I don't remember.
Yeah, the second side of this too is that we have a statement under the quotes and bids for non-professional services, so anything goods and services not professional, that it would automatically go to the lowest bidder. And clearly, we've run RFPs, and as we awarded Moss Levy, they weren't the lowest bidder, but they were the best value, they were the best choice for the district. And ultimately, that really should be stated. We should not be committing ourselves to
The
take
lowest
simply
bidder.
the lowest bid. I mean, we're not building the space shuttle here and, you know, we have 200,000 moving parts, you know, put together by the lowest bidder, right?
Terrifying.
So the point is that if we have people who are reasonably going to be evaluating these RFPs, if you ran, for example, an IFB, or you simply ran a bid, okay, and it was for whatever, a replacement of one of the pumps. And in that case, it's not really formal, but you want to get bids, and it's more of a construction or facilities kind of related project, then in most cases, historically, those are bid and given to the lowest bidder. But where you're running an RFP, it needs to be the best value for the district.
Right.
And that needs to be stated other than just the lowest bidder. With regard to professional services, I think that those requirements should mirror. In other words, we shouldn't have separate categories for goods and non-professional services versus professional services. Or if we are, then there needs to be, yeah, that we have to have the accountability. So to drive that, we at least have to have benchmarks. I'm not saying that we need to run Blaine through the process of running, you know, giving us an RFP proposal for whatever project. However, there should be steps taken prior to simply sole source awarding to him,
Yeah.
that we have benchmarked pricing, that we can go
And
to
then-
our,
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to interject because I think we're getting a little off topic, but to address that point to you, Director Sangster, we are hopefully by December or January going to be bringing an RFP process before the board. That way we can apply that process for when we're going out, you know, I think the first big one's gonna be for the wastewater treatment facility. So we're gonna be putting that in place hopefully December, latest January.
and I appreciate that.
Why not?
My concern with that is that right now, we have no accountability to say anything that we've paid for or committed to contract, that we've done any sort of benchmarking to ensure that we have spent the resources responsibly. So that's my point.
Thank you.
That's all.
Was there public comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I like what he had to say, but going back to a couple of previous comments, A number of years ago, the policies were rewritten because we had a manager not really following any procedures. We had 2 or 3 credit cards out there that were randomly being used and not really directed correctly in the payroll or the accounting. And so,
They're being used for personal use.
yes, and a lot of progress has been made there, and that's something I always look at is the credit card account, and there's just one, I believe, one credit card being used that is fully accounted for. I think there was an item on there for $1.25 in this, and the one today. And so you see all the details of what it was spent for and what department, and that's a tremendous improvement. And the whatever you call it, process would, I think, be a great addition to this policy and make things even smoother. But overall, it's come a long ways
Right.
in terms of controlling that.
And I also like the part about not necessarily the lowest bidder, but the greatest value to the district.
Right.
That's really important.
Finding the balance point, yeah.
Just for the board in Laverne, we do have one credit card, it's US Bank card, it's called a Cal card, so it has stipulations on what you can purchase or not. I always have to make a phone call if we're gonna use it for a hotel or something like that, or not run.
Yeah.
Right.
It has
That's
stipulations
typically
of
for
what you
gas
can
and
buy,
stuff
you
like
can't, you know.
Can't use it for gas.
Can't use it for gas?
Car rentals,
I'd be probably flagged too.
you have to get
Call
approval.
in
Right,
and
can merchant codes for hotel, we use US Bank in Cal Poly, flag, every hotel has a merchant
everything.
code.
But if I, you know, as long as you call and get an authorization and let them know what you're doing, then
Chances are
You
you're
know.
gonna change your ways.
it's a
So
nice card though.
is anybody suggesting any other changes? Or modifications? Is everybody happy with the less than 4,999? Are you good with that?
My big change would be that the professional services requirements mirror
Fall into
Fall
the
into
rest of
the
it,
other.
yeah.
categories.
I would agree with that.
You hear that,
But I'd also
Wayne?
I'd like to see corrections to what's in deficit for pertaining to this policy, you know, professional services, those type of things. I'd like to see at least paper records, purchasing policies. If you guys tell me that's done, good enough for me.
Oh, I
Definitely, we
understand.
were gonna make an assertive effort to follow the policy, and some things have happened without the right RFP or bid process, but I know Kelly spends a lot of time on the stuff that he goes over. It's high volume, and so sometimes the purchase gets made for the need, but for the most part, we're always looking and trying to find the best bid. For example, the AEDs that'll be, the request coming before you has certain parameters that it had to meet, but we also look for the best purchase. And I know Scott spent a lot of time on it, and I think we got the best deal we could get. So, I mean, you guys will see that, and so we are trying to be in compliance with the purchase.
There's obviously personal judgment used. If Kelly needed digging bars and they were $80 a whack, and somewhere else we could get them for $65 a whack?
25.
Well, all right, so we're talking about, $55 a piece. Overall, he bought 3, so we're looking at, $170 difference versus a purchase of $178,000. I would think that we would dedicate more time to the $178,000 purchase instead of the $170 purchase.
I think you should dedicate time to both.
Understood, but, I mean, if there isn't time, well, which one do you go, I'm gonna go find these digging bars for $25? Or, you know what I'm saying?
We need a Harbor Freight to pass a ordinance.
We need a Harbor Freight in San Miguel.
So can I get clarification, because I think there's a bunch of
Thank
noise
you.
on top. So do you guys want our office to work with staff at revising the entire policy, or there's just the certain provisions y'all were talking about?
My concern is Section 5
Okay,
and Section 6. I would like those to have the same requirements. In other words,
Okay.
we're not just,
Can you do that?
can I do that? I
No,
guess.
Rob can do that and then show you that and we can.
Yeah. Just hold off. We'll get back to you on that.
I'll
You
wait.
wait.
Okay.
Rob can do
Okay.
that.
Yes,
You mind?
no.
So
And then
one
clarify with
thing
you.
that, I'm not sure if you're aware or not, but we had an audit for the CDBG grant that we received for the SLT blending line. Part of their findings was some of the federal language was not included in our purchasing policy and our drug and alcohol policy and our conflict of interest code. So that is being worked on adding that, so this is gonna come back for that anyway.
Okay, good.
So if you're amenable to it, then we can bring back the changes you're interested in at the same time.
Right, and just have them review it, not review it on.
They are working
I
on
know.
federal language because that's
I know.
something that they'll have to do.
Right, because they have the language.
Are we going to address split purchase, or are we going to leave, let that?
Well, there's nothing in there about it, is there?
Yes.
Well, yeah, there's even
some,
a,
yeah,
there's even
Right,
an
yeah.
example of it.
In section,
What was described to me was, at the time, something happened and they actually benefited on, there was a cost savings by fixing the problem at the same time they were making the purchase.
Yes.
And I want to believe that.
Bulk discount.
Yeah.
Well, no, yeah,
Oh.
like I said, when
Our
we're
IT,
purchasing-
Alan, is extremely conscientious. Every nut, bolt, screw, he wants to get clarification, and then he lets us know the best bang for our buck. It's not always the cheapest, but he goes, you can buy the cheap stuff, we're gonna be right back here 6 months from now, or you get this and it's gonna last, and so, you know, we play the balance. Sometimes you can't
But
go
as
for.
as the purchasing authority, you
Yes.
have to know that split orders
Right,
is not,
no, and we'll
A reasonable
make
thing.
every effort never to do that.
Yeah,
That's-
let's not do that.
okay, so let's, that was a review, discuss, and provide direction. I think we did that well.
I think we did.
Okay.
Oh, that policy is actually in conflict. Section 1 and Section 4. So Section 4, well, it says should, and in Section 4 it should, they should get a purchase order, and Section 1 says they don't have to, without board of directors or issuance of a purchase order.
There should always be a purchase order.
So maybe we just need to just update it so there's always a purchase order regardless of dollar amount.
We're reviewing.
I have a hard time just with the fact that,
Huh?
like, I go buy a thing of stamps, or like for $1.13, like she was saying.
Purchase order,
That, I mean,
like postage.
everything, I mean,
which is.
I'm gonna be buying more and
There
more.
should be a justification for all purposes,
Yeah,
but
Maybe
there may
not a
not need
purchase
to be a
order.
purchase
purchase
order.
order, okay, I agree with that.
I did have.
But do we have a document that documents
Well, it's the same as a purchase order, it just
Yes.
doesn't have
The
the
expense report shows.
authorization.
It doesn't have number and all the things.
I did have one other point that might need clarification, item number 11 in the purchasing policy. It says, at least once annually, the manager will provide a list of credit cards to be issued, a physical inventory of credit cards, photocopying each card, and provide a report to the manager of the resulting inventory. So is the manager reporting to the manager?
So it's us.
Sometimes.
It's us showing him that we have our card, and a monthly, we show him what we buy on the cards.
Okay.
She's actually
What I-
stricter than what the policy says.
So the manager
because-
showed the general manager.
I think that was more
It's
of
missing
a
the
should be
general.
reporting to the board annually, so you know
Well, maybe it
what
could even
credit
be
cards are out there.
department
he
heads
can't
reporting
get
to
a
the
credit
manager.
card?
I just was, it didn't make a lot of sense, the manager.
It does say in
reporting.
there that we can't get more credit cards unless we come to
You know,
you.
it says,
I know-
at least once annually, the manager will provide a list of credit cards to be issued, a physical inventory of credit cards, photocopying each card, and provide a report to the manager
Should be
of the
general
results of the
The
inventory.
general, your manager, supervisor, the general manager.
So should that maybe be changed?
Well,
What page are you on, Ashley? I'm
So I'm
sorry.
sorry, I'm on page 16 of 18, which is 156 in the packet.
there's a cal card and the field cards, and those are where inventory.
Okay, right, all right.
when I have a state issued credit card, if I want to buy a box of pencils, I had to get approval. Had to do a PO, had to go through the whole 9 yards.
Then I don't
It's
wanna
not a
do that.
bad thing, it's,
I don't want to
it's-
put them in the mail
it's a
machine.
check and balance is what it is. It's a pain in the butt, but it's a check and balance, and that's the whole purpose.
Okay,
So are we gonna correct something there, or?
Well, I don't, if it's
Maybe you change the
justification.
manager, or supervisor to general manager.
General manager should be reviewing every purchase.
Agreed.
Every invoice goes into a folder, when I come in, I'm given that folder and I review every one of the purchases and sign that I send.
This is just an inventory of credit cards, so I was just curious who's reporting to who, since it says manager in both places.
Every receipt that's turned in is coded, so it has the
This
department.
is
Put that on your list.
inventory
How
of
about the person who it's issued to?
We only have one manager.
No, but
It's saying manager to manager.
Right.
It needs to
I think
say
it was-
supervisor to general manager.
Or department head.
Yeah, or department head.
manager will provide a list of credit cards to be issued.
We like
Based on
that
inventory of
supervisor
credit cards
slash
photocopied
department
with each
head.
card and provide a report to the manager
But
on the
I
results of
think,
the inventory.
I think that
That's
was,
what I'm saying, it just,
It's a typo.
I think that was originally intended because of too many credit cards out there the board knew nothing about. And because it was the manager, John knows that, telling you everything, and he just didn't tell you about all the credit cards that were going on. So I think that was the intent, for the board to be informed. Okay, now you have 5 credit cards and last year you only had
So
one? What
maybe
are
one of the
for?
managers should be changed to the board.
Is there any benefit to designating positions that will have cards, and if you're not in these positions, you do not have a card?
They're a manager,
Exactly.
myself, and then Scott.
So if we just designate,
Director,
How about
these people
manager,
have cards, nobody else.
supervisor, director,
Department
manager.
head
Correct.
reports to the manager, department head.
Yes.
Well, like
We only have
managers,
one manager.
Right.
The others are
Driver
supervisors.
slash directors.
Right, the verbiage needs to be changed to reflect that. And then each engine has a fuel card, and those are accounted for every time we get fuel in every vehicle has a fuel
How
card.
about we go through red lines and bring it back to them?
Okay, we beat that up. Can we move on?
Yeah, we did.
You'll be seeing it again.
Now we're gonna review and discuss the San Miguel Community Services District Board Members Handbook, and this is for very specific reasons. It's a minor item, but it's
Do you want
Do you wanna take this one?
no, go ahead.
Oh, okay. The Board of Directors have requested that the handbook be brought before the board for review. Both staff and board directors have requested to make changes to the format of the board meeting agenda, chapter 11. In order to make any changes to the agenda, the board handbook has to be reviewed and the bylaws have to be amended before any changes can be made. So, when we're talking about the county reports and all the individual entities that were on there,
There's 3 of them.
time of day, date of the meeting and that stuff, if you guys want to change the format of that you guys have to review it,
Revise the,
revise
so
it, and then vote on it.
We're
Before the change
talking
can be made.
about taking items on the staff and committee reports, taking items 1 through 3,
You just need
and
to-
combining them into
one big one,
just
county
San Luis Obispo
report,
County.
county staff
county
report.
agencies or
I'm
whatever?
gonna put
County
San Luis
agency report.
Obispo, or San Luis Obispo County.
Okay,
It's just, that's all we need to put.
And then
Are we gonna get a report?
Yeah, you do.
we're just gonna combine them into one
I had
thing.
John Pashon here,
yeah, who's here?
and you missed it.
And then there was a request
He
to
said,
have,
who's Ashley?